AIM-listed 4D Pharma has come through with some good news recently. It's received FDA clearance for its treatment of Parkinson's disease. Significantly, the company says this marks the expansion into neurology. Let's get some more details now and what's been seen with this advance with the Chief Executive of 4D Pharma, Duncan Peyton. Duncan, good to have you back in on the hot seat again. Clearly, this has been good news. It was received, I think, with a 12% uptick in the shares. There's been a little bit of a retracement since then, but clearly good news. But give us some more detail about what this means for 4D.
Yeah, before I talk about 4D, I mean, it's good news in terms of Parkinson's. Parkinson's, as we know, is a devastating illness. Globally affects about 10 million people, and sadly, that number is not going to go down, particularly as the population ages. So, there's a need for novel therapeutic treatments. There's a need to move from drugs which try to address the symptoms. So at the minute, we try to address Parkinson's by increasing neural stimulation or some form of protein degradation, which are the signs that people look at in terms of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And if you talk to Michael J. Fox Foundation, if you talk to Parkinson's UK, if you talk to Cure Parkinson's, what we're looking for are for drugs that are able to slow, stop, or reverse the progression of Parkinson's disease. And, when we're looking for drugs to do that, what we're looking to do is we're looking for drugs which can make sure that the cells are in the best health possible. So we're looking to reduce oxidative stress. We're looking to make sure there's no mitochondrial dysfunction. We're looking to reduce neuroinflammation. We're looking to increase neurotransmissions and neurotropic growth factors, as well as stimulate particularly for Parkinson's, the dopaminergic neurons. And what we found with two of the strains from our MicroRx platform is that we can do that with two bacteria that you just simply dose orally into the gut. So, it's good news, good progression, good news, good for Parkinson's patients, good for clinicians, good for 4D Pharma.
Now, I said this, and a quote from the statement that you issued at the time, it marks the expansion into neurology. Does this
Correct.
expand your footprint unexpectedly, or was this all part of the plan to show that 4D was going to go into this new area for the company?
It's a great question. I think one of the things about 4D Pharma is we're very scientific focused. You have to remember the microbiome and live biotherapeutics, where we're using single strains to deliver therapeutic effect. When we started the company, we didn't really know how far or how broad this modality could reach. And using the platform, which is able to pick out these single strains, which have this very defined effect, and we found it in oncology, which we talked about just before and after Christmas. We announced the work that we'd seen in asthma, which was really a good step, another good step forward for the company, and now into neurodegeneration. And the work that we've done in Parkinson's really comes off the back of the work preclinically that we started off with multiple sclerosis and other neurodegenerative diseases. So it's something we've been working on for a number of years, and it's just being able to take this into the clinic, particularly with the safety profile that our drugs offer. It's a real step forward.
So what's the next stage then for this treatment? As I said, you've had FDA clearance. Precisely what does that mean? What does it enable you to do now?
Well, that allows us to start talking to the trial sites, setting up the trial, to eventually start to bring patients in to take the drugs, in which we'll monitor those patients and see how, obviously it's the first time that this particular strain or this particular drug, if you like, has been in the patient. So we'll look for the safety and tolerability in those patients. But we've dosed over nearly 600 patients now with our drugs, and we haven't seen any sort of side effects that give us any cause for concern. But we're also, because we're going into patients in this stage of trial, we'll look at some of the clinical symptoms for Parkinson's. We also look at some of the markers that we've generated for these particular bacteria that we think will give us more information about how we're doing in terms of slowing, stopping, stroke, reversing Parkinson's.
It's a very frustrating process, I know, certainly for an investor looking at a company and going through this process of approvals and so forth. But we do know as well, don't we, from experience in the last couple of years, that the FDA or the various drug administration agencies around the world can move really, really fast if we need to. I mean, the COVID drugs were really good examples. What's the FDA's timescale on this, do you think? Are they keen to get this over the finish line as soon as possible, or has it gone back to the old system of waiting and trialing and moving on and
I think
whatever?
There's a really good case in point with the Biogen drug Aduhelm, and how the FDA moved to get that approved on what was there's still debate about how effective that drug is, and Parkinson's is a big area. Neurodegeneration is a big area. So I think if you can bring something which is novel, safe, and effective, then I think the FDA will look at that favorably. But the FDA, they have their processes. They want to make sure that you can, reliably, repeatably, and safely produce your product. That's what they're there for. So, if you can work with those guys, then I'm sure, if we're seeing good results, then they'll take it forward as quickly as they can.
Yeah. I want to ask another question on behalf of investors, and that is what 4D is doing in the other areas of interest, the business, the oncology side. I believe we're expecting an announcement later on this quarter, which we're obviously now into the final month of the quarter. Are you on target for telling us more about what's happening on the oncology side?
Yeah, we are. So, we'll discuss that at a date, and we'll announce what date we're going to talk about the oncology date. And I think it's really, what we'll be talking about there is really what we found out working alongside people like Merck. We just, we started to try with Bavencio, with Merck KGaA. And I think, really give some direction to how we see the microbiome playing out in the field of oncology, and, the belief that we have that it can really make an impact, not only in the people who are refractory, the really sick people, but also in the earlier stage as well. So it's something, we're excited about, and we'll give some direction to that later on this month.
Yeah. Look, there's been some other news which is not particularly good in the sector recently. And I mean, I know that 4D Pharma, like all the companies in this area, get affected by news when you get things like Pfizer's C. difficile vaccine candidate failing to hit the endpoint. Finch Therapeutics, I believe, is finding itself in a similar sort of position. When this sort of news comes through and it reverberates around the sector, clearly there's bound to be some effect on the share price and valuations and so forth. Can you comment on anything that we've seen recently and whether or not 4D can separate itself away from that sort of bad news? Yeah,
I think one of the, C. diff is a disease of the gut, and the way that Finch are addressing it is they're using an ecological approach. So they're just producing bacteria to outcompete the infection, if you like. And it should work. FMT, so fecal transplantation, works in C. diff. So, their product should work. What the FDA are saying is because they're using material sourced from humans as their drug, they're concerned about transmission of infectious diseases like COVID. So, and that affects people who are working in consortia and working with human material. That doesn't apply to 4D Pharma. In fact, the whole ethos and thesis of Finch doesn't apply to 4D Pharma. They're using an ecological approach to outcompete an infection. We're using a very targeted strain which has a very specific therapeutic effect that acts like a drug, and it acts on diseases systemically. So it acts on things like oncology, things like asthma, things like Parkinson's. And that's very different to the consortia approach. And the way that we manufacture our drugs is very different as well. So we use cell-based methods. So it's synthetically produced, even though the bacteria originates from the human gut. It's a single strain. It's pure, and it's produced under CGMP conditions. So it's a very different prospect to what Finch is doing, and that's why we have a really strong safety profile, because we can have that repeatable, reliable, safe product.
And of course, as chief executive, it's your job to keep investors going and cooking on the subject that you're trying to give them. And any good news that you've had in the Parkinson's thing clearly is good news in the grand scheme of things. Let me just bring up a share price chart, if I can, of 4D Pharma. I mean, you'll know this really well. I've drawn a line underneath where we are at the moment, and you can see we're not too far away from the COVID lows that we had. Before we went to air, you and I were talking about the biotech ETF, which, to be frank with you, is a very similar sort of thing. Clearly, it's a sector-wide effect coming off the highs. The highs driven, obviously, by what's happening in COVID. There was indiscriminate buying right across the board. And I know that 4D, and we spoke about this, did benefit a little bit by that. So clearly some of this downside is just eating back into what was speculative gains out of the COVID period. What do you say to investors about what's happening at the company? Because clearly, I mean, you're pre-revenue, so you are burning cash. At what rate, I'm not sure. But I mean, you can only have to look at the balance sheet to work out that. But what do you say to investors about the prospects for 4D and where you are in the point of ultimately delivering back to shareholders value in terms of profits?
I think it's a great question. You know, you talked about the frustrations from the investor point of view about, you know, the time that it takes to develop a drug. And I think, you know, developing a drug is challenging. Developing a drug that is a new modality is more challenging. Developing a drug that's a new modality in a falling market is even more challenging. And, you know, what we can continue to do is push forward with the science that we've got. Our thesis is proving out. We're seeing that from, you know, the differences with Finch in terms of just single strain is easier, safer, cleaner to manufacture. We're seeing it able to address systemic disease. So we can go after oncology, we can go after Parkinson's, we can, you know, go after asthma. Whereas if you're trying to just deal with infectious diseases, you really got, C. diff, which is where a lot of the microbiome companies are playing. So we can continue to push that science forward, continue to look at new therapeutic areas. We continue to work well with our partners, particularly with MSD in the vaccine space, which gives us another string to our bow, and that's where we're using their vaccine expertise and our expertise, the microbiome, to come together to develop new and novel vaccines as well. So I think it's, I understand the frustrations. I'm an investor myself. I think over the last couple of years, I've put in, over $1 million into the business. Seeing the share price decrease is difficult, but as a company, we continue to generate data. We continue to push the science forward. We continue to deliver, innovative and safe therapies, which is what we set out to do. So I understand the frustrations. We'll keep doing our job. We'll keep pushing forward.
Yeah. Just want to quickly return, if I can, to the milestones. You got this oncology announcement later on this month. Then what for the rest of 2022?
The rest of 2022, so, we've got the Bavencio trial starting. Would like to move into Part B of the asthma study. Would like to start the Parkinson study as well in 2022. So we've got a lot of things, still going on. Would like to talk more about the research that we're doing. So hopefully halfway through the year, we'll host a research day where we'll talk more about the things which are coming through the pipeline, which sometimes don't get the spotlight, which, I think they rightly deserve. So a lot of stuff still going on within 4D Pharma.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing more. Duncan, thanks indeed for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you back.
You.
As I say, back in the hot seat, and looking forward to catching up with you later on in the year as well. That's Duncan Peyton. He's Chief Executive of 4D Pharma.